As I was saying, in this case, ladies and gentlemen, the discussion has basically been, do you decide to blow it up at this point, knowing that you just lost to a Portland team playing without their best player? You're now sitting at this point basically on the borderline, you guys. That's basically it. On the borderline of the playoffs, you have the New York Knicks right there fighting with you for the very last spot. You're definitely not going to be a top four team at this point in the Eastern Conference, which means you're basically not going to be given no shot to get to the NBA Finals this year. Whether it's that you basically get beat fair and square by one of those top four teams, or in this situation, the NBA decides to stop you in this case, which we all know that that's a potential at this point, that the NBA ends up basically getting involved and decides to stop you in some sort of way, because they want the teams that can basically bring in the most ratings, because that's where all the money is at. So I would say at this point, ladies and gentlemen, you hear us out. For any of you basically who are still trying to debate basically the idea of this rumor, as I mentioned, or as I was trying to mention, basically, I'm sure I doubt that basically you were able to hear me based on the issue with the microphone that just took place with StreamYard. The rumor is, again, both Schroeder and Marcus Smart go to the Utah Jazz along with 2 second-round picks in exchange for Bogan Bogdanovic. Of course, many of you are saying you do not want it at this point, that you do not want to make the move. It seems like really the issue is you do not want to make the move because you do not want to get rid of Marcus Smart. Many of you seem like you're willing to let go of Schroeder because most likely you're going to lose Schroeder anyway at the end of the season. So Marcus Smart is really the one piece you do not want to accept losing at this point. So the question is, do you let go of Marcus Smart for the potential of what you could get going down the line in this situation by eliminating his contract, by getting Bogan Bogdanovic's contract, which we will explain to you basically what his contract looks like in this case? Or do you basically keep Marcus Smart and potentially eliminate the chance of getting a third superstar in this case? So you can easily look into the group, ladies and gentlemen. For any of you that are members of the We Bleed Green Celtics Fan Forum group, there is a post that Igor put up that we did basically in the comment section, give you the names of every free agent that's going to be available in the 2023 free agency market. So for you to all see who the Celtics could be in the running for if they do decide to basically trade away Marcus Smart at this point. So you can kind of basically look at it a little bit more from an understanding of where we're coming from, as to basically understanding why we're saying you have a better reason to basically let go of Smart than keeping him at this point. So stop basically looking at this from a standpoint of Celtic glasses, with the Celtic glasses on, and look at it more with the NBA championship glasses on in this situation, because you ain't going to do it so long as we have all the loyalty with these players. So, Andy, Igor, let's get your thoughts in this situation at this point. First, we'll talk about last night's game, and then we'll jump to the issue with the trades in this case. Again, the Celtics ended up losing that game 109-105, 11-point lead with just over 7 minutes. I believe it was 7:09 to be exact, before the Portland Trail Blazers decided to make their run and ultimately took the game in this case late. Tatum had 27 points on 8 of 19 shooting. He played 41 minutes out of the 48. Didn't make a single three-pointer. I believe they said that's 3 straight games that Tatum hasn't been able to make a three in this case. 11 of 14 from the free throw line, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, again 27. Brown had 22, 35 minutes played, 7 of 20 from the floor, 2 of 7 from the three-point line, 3 from three-point land, 6 of 6 from the free throw line, 5 rebounds, 5 assists in this case. After that, nobody else from the starting lineup managed to get to the double digits in this case. Schroeder had 9, so he just fell 1 point shy. Horford had 6, and Time Lord, who played 33 minutes. So he played after Brown and Tatum. Time Lord played the next most in this case, yet he scored the least amount of points in this case out of all those guys in this situation. He scored 5. Grant Williams off the bench had 13. He was the highest scorer off the bench in this case, 13 points in 33 minutes. Romeo Langford scored 12. Pritchard scored 6. Richardson scored 5. Freedom, in this case, played only 3 minutes and had no points. Fernando, Hauser, and Thomas were, again, no coach's decision, didn't get to play in this situation. So there was a lot of talk about in this situation about the lineup that Brad Stevens opted to use last night, which featured Grant Williams. Udoka decided to use with Langford, Time Lord, I believe it was, Tatum, Brown, and I believe it was Schroeder in this case. Seems like a lot of members in the group were torn. Some of them basically felt it was going in the right direction at one point, but ultimately cost us the game, that he may have used it a little bit too long. Others basically felt it was the right decision to make, that, maybe he basically needs to do a little bit of tweaking, and that the guys just need a little bit more time together, but that could basically be maybe the lineup he uses going forward. So let's get your thoughts in this case. Andy, what were your thoughts about yesterday's game?
I mean, I think it's going to be basically the same thoughts that I've had about this team all season. They're not. I don't even want to say they're not that good of a team. There's talent on the roster. When you look at our roster, there is talent there. It's not performing well. It doesn't play well together. And I don't think that, when I say that Tatum and Brown don't play well together, I don't want fans to jump to the conclusion that I'm saying they can't play well together. What I'm saying is that right now they're not playing well together. And really, that's sort of a microism of the team as a whole. I think the only two players that I would say are really performing, what I would consider to be maximum value, or close to what their potential would be this season. The only two I can really think of are Time Lord, and I think Grant Williams has had a very nice season. A lot of fans haven't really talked about it. He's not a big part of, he's a role player, but for a role player, I think he's had a very nice season overall. But when we look at the people, we look at a lot of the other players on the roster. I mean, they're just not performing. They're not even close to where they should be. Brown's had a regression in his shooting. Tatum is, I don't know what happened to Tatum's 3-point shooting. I don't know if, him and Marcus Smart were practicing together in the off season, or what the deal is with that. Tatum is awful from beyond the arc this year. And then we look at other players on the roster, guys like Enes Kanter, for example, Enes Freedom. I'm never going to be able to get used to the Enes Freedom thing. So, Kanter, if you look at him, against or when he was playing with the Trailblazers last year, he had a lot of great games. There was very real debate in Trailblazer fan forums that Enes Kanter should replace Nurkic as the starting center. And, we go from that, and now he's on Boston, and all of a sudden he's like we saw last night, 3 minutes, he's a complete non-factor. So at some point in time, I think this game really just kind of shows we're not maximizing what is already on the roster here. We're not, getting the most out of our players, which when you're a team, we are under-talented compared to where we have been in other years, with only having Tatum and Brown for stars. We don't really have a point guard. We have the the retirement version of Al Horford. And when you have a team like that, and you're especially relying on a lot of these younger guys like Peyton Pritchard, Romeo Langford, Grant Williams, you really have to get the maximum performance out of them. You have to have have designed a system that's going to put those guys in the right spots to be successful. Because otherwise you're going to be a sub-50 team. And that's really what we've seen, is we don't put these guys in positions where they're going to be successful. And I don't know exactly where that's going wrong. But when I look at other young players across the NBA, the ones who are on other teams, and when I look at people like Enes Freedom, compare last year with the Blazers to this year with the Celtics, it just tells me that somewhere in our coaching staff, there's either a disconnect where the front office is getting players that the coaching staff doesn't want, or the coaching staff just doesn't know how to use these guys. It can't think outside the box enough to draw up sets and to create a strategy, for those 5 to 10 minutes that you're playing Enos Freedom, to draw up a strategy where you're going to maximize what he does and try to minimize what he doesn't do. And I think we saw a lot of that against the Blazers. The other thing that I saw there was just how bad we are offensively. The Blazers, I believe, are a bottom 3 defensive team going into that game. Like, I'm pretty sure they're like the bottom, second from the bottom or third from the bottom.
Top 3 worst defensive teams in the NBA.
Yeah, and they have been for years. It's not like that's a new development. The Trailblazers are an awful defensive team. They have been for like 2 or 3 years. As somebody who plays daily fantasy basketball, one of the strategies that you used was you rostered a bunch of people who were playing against the Trailblazers because you knew they were going to get a lot of points. And so when you play a team that's bad defensively, a bottom team defensively in the NBA, from a coaching point, from a player point of view, and from a coaching point of view, you can't go for whatever it was, 5 or 7 minutes in the fourth quarter without really scoring points. You can't go for long stretches of the game period, because it wasn't just that end of the game. Like there were stretches of that game where we just couldn't score. And you can't do that against a team that's a bad defensive team. Like, if we lose to the Blazers because it's a shootout and they just flat out outscore us. Okay, whatever. Our defense needs work, but that's what it is. But when you can't go and you go for stretches without being able to score against a bottom 3 defensive team in the NBA, and you have Jason Tatum, who, he struggled shooting this year, but he's still a good offensive player. You have Jaylen Brown. There's no excuse for that. And that's on the players, because as star players, you need to find ways to score the basketball, especially against bad defensive teams. And second of all, it's on the coach. Because as a coach, you shouldn't have an entire roster of guys that go cold against a bad defensive team. It just shouldn't happen. And so that's kind of what I felt about the Blazers game. But like I said, I can't even say I'm that disappointed, because that's what we've seen all season from this Celtics team. That kind of lack of focus, the lack of effort, the fact that they don't look like they prepare for games. And that was another thing that stood out to me, is it just looked like we didn't really prepare for the game. I don't know. Maybe we were all having drinks up at the North End the last couple of nights, and just decide to party and recover from the hangovers and not really practice or plan for the game. And that's what it's looked like. It's not just this game. There's several games that have looked that way this season, and to me, that's just it's laziness. That type of lack of preparation that is painful. To me anyway, it's kind of painfully obvious they're unprepared in a lot of games, and that's kind of unforgivable at that level of the sport. Period. But especially on a team like Boston, where you're basically expected to be contending almost every year, or at least where ownership is billing you as being a contender every year, you can't have, it's going to happen. It's a long season. There's, too many games to not have it happen a few times. It happens to the best teams. But for it to happen consistently enough that a lot of fans and a lot of analysts have called them out on this at various points in time throughout the season, it's happening way too much. And once again, I'm not a Udoka fan. I don't think he was the best person for the job, but it's not only his fault. It also falls on those players, because when you're at that level in any profession, I don't care if you're a basketball player, an accountant, a housekeeper, I don't care what your job is. If you're in that top 1% of your professional field, you're expected to be able to motivate yourself to do what needs to be done yourself. You're not, you shouldn't be at that level and have a coach or a supervisor holding your hand and spoon feeding you what to do. You should be doing that on your own. So that's how I feel.
Okay, I mean, Andy said pretty much all alongside you, Danny, about Portland game. I would not waste too many time on Portland game. Uh, I mean, what stick to me from this game and the previous game that was also loss. Jason Tatum shooted 1 of 22 for 3, and from the bottom of my head, he is shooting 31% for threes, which is surprising to tell you the truth. Also, the Celtics were leading by 11 points with 7 minutes left. They didn't score a single basket, field goal the rest of the way, which is kind of surprising, despite we are bad fourth period team. Especially we are bad offensively. Like I said, I mean, searching for Jason Tatum stats and splits, really don't want to shoot at him at all again, but it is kind of shocking to me, and I don't know what is going on with him, to tell the truth, and it is worrisome, because he's our
He's
best player.
0 for 17. 0 for 17 on threes over the last 3 games.
0 for 17. That's even worse. So my data is not good. 3-point shooting regression league wide. I caught a tweet. He's not the only one that is regressing. By the way, that's something to be noted. Year one, 43% for three. That's 2018 famous run. Year two, 37%. Year three, 40%. Year four, 38%, and year 5, 31%. Again, what is happening with him in this year? I don't know, but I think that Forsberg had interesting information by zones about Jason Tatum. And one note is that on this very game against Portland, he was missing tones of open looks. It is not like he was shooting over the players or something, very difficult, but he was actually missing open shoots. So here is the room for error. Defender distance. Defenders distance by Chris Forsberg. Listen to this. Jason Tatum. Defenders distance. I'm only talking this year. I have informations for previous 5 years, but it's never mind. So if Jason Tatum is shooting very tight, listen to this. This year, no informations, no data, but for example, previous year, Jason was shooting 50% when defender was all 2 2 all and or 2 feet away, very tight defender. Year before he was shooting 100%, and this year no shoots. Now second category, from 2 feet or until 4 feet. This is tight defender distance, 2 feet to 4 feet. Tatum is shooting 25.8%. Now, when defender is 4 feet to 6 feet, this is open. He's shooting 33.5%. You can say 34%. Now, 6 plus feet defender, wide open. This is category wide open. Tatum is shooting 31%. Now, this is inexplicable. Previous season, wide open shoots for 3, 6 feet or longer, he was shooting 52.4%, for example. I mean, you can say that every player he was asked about it, and he said that he is thinking that it is kind of shooting slump or something. Okay, the problem with this team is Jared Carson, the comment under We Bleed Green. The problem with this team is Jace. The supporting cast is as good as most teams in the league. It's Jace. The all stars who get paid to be big guns are not living up to their jobs. I disagree. I disagree. If you look at our bench, you will notice that in production, uh, they are top five worst benches in the league. Actually, I will search for informations a couple of games before, and this is not something that is big secret. For example, Boston Celtics bench. I will demand Mr. Jarrett right away. So listen to this. Minutes played 15.9 minutes per game. In minutes played, our bench is 27th in the NBA. What does that mean? That Ime Udoka is using one of the shortest rotations in the NBA. Why? Why? At this stage of the season, why? Points per game, 27.8 points per game, 28 in the NBA in production. So, is our bench good? No, it's horrible. No, now you can say Ime Udoka, COVID, injuries, health, Martians, bad weather, bad crowd. I agree about all of that, but they are bad. Are they have been used badly, or like Andy pointed, the rotations are bad and the lineups are wrong at the games most of the time? Yes. But you cannot say that our bench is good and the Jays are bad because that's just not truth. You know, are the Jays? I mean, and about the blame, by the way, I don't think that Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum are the biggest problem this year. Yes, the problem is not that they are bad, but the problem is that we expected from them to make a leap. Previously, I mean, I was talking to Danny. What are the conditions the Celtics to become the true contenders? For example, now Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum. One of the conditions, for example, Jason Tatum must enter the top 10 players in the NBA in all conversations, and Jalen Brown must be close to that, like top 15, and that is the nucleus. Now you must add another All-Star, preferably point guard, and if you add All-Star point guard close to maximum contract, then you need a serviceable center that is not high paid, but I'm afraid different type than Robert Williams. Now, also you need the stretch forward 3 and D, like Jay Crowder, for example, in Phoenix, and Al Horford is not that. And you get the impression, what do we miss? Now, I mean, also we need a bench that is fulfilled with veterans that are constantly capable of giving us production from the bench. And we don't have that bench. Now, you can see, I mean, that's not true that we have. What is the players that you can rely on the bench? Now, in normal circumstances, you can say, okay, Marcus Smart, great bench guy, sixth man of the bench. Now, Dennis Schroeder, sixth man of the bench, great scorer of the bench. Great. Enes Kanter, good man of the bench. I'm afraid so. No. Grant Williams was good in the first 30 games or so. He kind of slowed down. I mean, But
Oh, he's still
again,
shooting 42% from beyond.
42.5, the best shooter at the team, right? And the best progress, you can say Robert Williams and Grant Williams, the biggest progress of the team. But as a whole, the bench is not playing well. Which fault is that? I mean, I don't know. Probably Ime Udoka. Like I said, I was criticizing him for not playing the bench. I want the Celtics to get rid of veterans except Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, and to play the kids, because there is no point on pushing right now at the playoff, because we are maximum potential first round playoff exit, and we're not getting anything. In that case, okay. So I don't know how much game, like 35 games rest left. I mean, we must decide what are we going to do with our season, because this way it is not working. I mean, again, and about the guilt, to return to Mr. Jared's question, which the blame pie, I would say from the general, I mean, it's just like when your army, Andy, your army man, military man, and Kevin is going to hopefully join us later. I mean, when your army is losing, do you find responsible the lowest officer at the army, like sergeant or lieutenant or general? Me personally, the one who is responsible and who is the most responsible for the loss is usually the general. Who is the general at the Celtics, you will ask? Well, for me, ownership group, Mr. Vic Grusbeck and Steve Paluca. Of course, they are not appearing at the TD Garden, and I totally understand them, because if I'm Vic Grusbeck, I would not appear to the Garden, because I would be afraid that the crowd would put a bottle of beers at my face. But they are the most responsible, because they are the generals, Mr. Jared Carson, right? So they are at the chain of command, the top. Now you can go down. You can say Brad Stevens for assembling this team, then Ime Udoka and his staff for coaching, and then you can come to Jays as all stars and the leaders of the team. But you cannot blame them. I mean, and believe me, Mr. Jared, I am not Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown fans. Everybody that knew me, know that. I'm not the big fan of theirs, but it's not their their blame. This team is horribly assembled. This team is less talented than the last year's team. And while everybody was prizing Brad Stevens and what they did in the summer, I thought that we downgraded in the talent, and I thought that we would fight for the play-in tournament spot. But I didn't believe that we would be so bad, I must tell you. And that is my answer. Danny, do you have something to add? I think that we have one more comment. 1 minute, please. Make a leap. How about just score 10? Okay, make a leap. How about just score 10 points apiece in the fourth period? Maybe Iman needs to learn lessons 2 minutes to keep them more fresh for fourth. I agree. I agree. Again, I'm not giving any excuse to Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. Again, we must wait. I don't believe that Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown reached their ceiling. They are not young basketball-wise. They are young in years. And the youth excuse is not working for me in years 5 and 6. They are experienced enough for me, and they should be more consistent. You can calculate injuries. In Jalen Brown case, in the first 20 games or so, he was missing like 14 games. You can calculate COVID to Jason. He was having COVID like two or three times. And again, I'm not making any excuses about injuries, but objectively speaking, they were injured. Now, the last 2 years, Jason Tatum is stagnating or regressing, and the sad thing is that many other younger players that are maybe not as talented as Jason Tatum is, they are surpassing Jason Tatum, and it is not good for the franchise. So for me, about Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, I would keep them. I would try to build a team around them, but I would wait another year or two. Again, to repeat, Boston Celtics to be contenders, they must make a huge leap. I mean, Jason Tatum to be top 10 or 12 players, and Jaylen Brown to be close, like top 15. I mean, and the Celtics, of course, to put the team around them, and then we could be the true contenders. In the next 2 years, for example, I think those are the 2 years that are key for Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and this team. So if they can make a leap, and if they can correct their mistakes, I think that we will be good. If they cannot make corrections in their game, I'm afraid that the team must, think about the path that they're going, because I think that general manager Stevens or whoever is general manager at the time will have to react if the team performs 500 2 years from now. Daniel, your thoughts?
Well, again, I think we've basically said it in the group, and we've been saying it basically since the start of the season. This is pretty much where the team had to basically make their decision. This was going to be the final curtain call, in our opinion, for the three of us in this situation. And I think Kevin kind of said it the same, kind of said it also. I know a few members in the group kind of said it as well, knowing that 2023, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be one hell of a free agency market in this case. Like I said, you don't believe me? Go and look at that post that Igor posted where I said the comment is at in this situation. Hell, if you people want, I can just put up a few names in this situation and have it scroll at the bottom of our screen in this situation for you to see. In this case.
Danny, let's explain what is our idea, because the people are telling us at the page, well, you are just talking heads, you're just criticizing everything, you're not offering the solutions. Well, we said what we should do, right? From the start of the year. But let's say right now that we were talking among ourselves and we concluded what we should do, like 34 or 35 games in the season, to load off the veterans, to sell the veterans, and to tank by design, to give the young guys the minutes, to give Naismith, to give Langford, to give Pritchard, to give Williams, another Williams, minutes, the real minutes, not 5 minutes or 15 minutes, but 25, 30 minutes per game. And to get as much assets as we can for the veterans, and to clear the cap, to clear the space, and to chase the third star in the future. This summer or the next summer. That's what we should do. And to get the top 12 pick. Now, the people are saying that the tanking is not working, that the draft is trash, that it would take 5 years to develop the player from the draft. Again, we are not saying that we should develop the players and to rebuild via draft, because getting top 12 pick, top 7 to top 12 pick, is getting one asset. In order to rebuild faster, you need to get assets, because if we want to make a trade for the big name, potentially, if we change the team policy one day, I hope. So if you want to make a trade, the big trade, you need a set. You need a first round pick. And we don't have that because we wasted tons of pick in the past. We flushed like 22 picks down the toilet the past 5 seasons. So in order to make better, you need assets, and that's young players that can play, produce on the high level, and we don't have them on the team. And kudos to Grant Williams and Robert Williams. The one is injured, and another is the best young player at the team right now, Grant Williams, with good working ethic. I mean, we don't have the young players that are good trade bites, realistically speaking. So we need to start to accumulate assets. And Danny, please explain your idea to the fans.
Well, again, so ladies and gentlemen, the trade in this case, again, is Marcus Smart and Dennis Schroeder plus 2 second-round picks to the Utah Jazz for Bojan Bogdanovic in this case. Now, Bojan Bogdanovic in this case has a 2-year deal, which of course this season is the first year. So his contract expires after next season. Now, if you're somebody who basically wants to kind of look up this information to confirm whether or not basically I'm accurate with my information and all that, all you got to do is go to hoopshype.com in this situation, and you can look up that information for yourself in this case. But again, Bogdanovic's contract expires after next season. And if you was to look at how the Celtics have the rest of their players, their contracts basically set up, practically every player on the Celtics, except for Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Robert Williams, and Marcus Smart, of course, at this point, would expire after next season also. So if you were to get rid of Marcus Smart, you would only have 3 players after next season set to expire. 3 players left to keep going after everybody else is gone. So, as I said, 2023 is set to be a major free agency market. I'm talking names like LeBron James, I'm talking names like Bradley Beal, who could be on the market if he was to accept his player option for next season and then opts to basically become part of that 2023 market in this situation. There's going to be a ton of names. Nikola Vucevic is going to be a part of that 2023 market, so you can easily find that information, ladies and gentlemen, also online. Plenty of websites that will give you that insight in this case. So if the Celtics were to go the route, and I'll just put this out because I have the banners here. So 2023-2024 roster, guaranteed money right now. Tatum is set to make $32.6 million that season for us guys. Brown is scheduled to make $30.7. Marcus Smart, if he's still with us, is scheduled to make $18.5. Rob Williams is scheduled to make $11.5 in this case. Right now, for next season, the salary cap is expected to be $119 million in this case, meaning that the salary cap for 2023-2024 is likely going to be maybe $10 million more in this case, so likely $129 million or so, based on how it always seems to increase about roughly that amount in this situation. So if you were to basically take Tatum and Brown and Time Lord's money and combine it, meaning you trade Marcus Smart right now with Schroeder, along with those 2 second-round picks, give the Jazz what they're probably asking for, and take Bojan Bogdanovic back so that his contract could expire after next season, along with Horford, along with Grant Williams, and all these other guys whose contracts are set to expire, then basically you have, again, only Tatum, Brown, and Time Lord, who combined would make only $74.8 million, just rounded up to $74.9 million in this case, that season. So $75 million, you guys, out of $119 million at that point. Or 100, that's if you would have just used, like I said, just use next year, Igor and Andy, $119 million for next year's salary cap. Just use that number. Let's say it doesn't increase going into 2023, 2024. $75 million at 119. You're left with $44 million in salary cap space to use in that market. You're telling me you don't think you can find some decent names in the situation in that market with $44 million to spend? Whether it's one of those big names like Bradley Beal in this situation, or even some of these players who have been kicking our ass. I know, think, how many times has Terrence Ross given us trouble whenever we play the Magic? He's going to be on the market that year. You don't think Terrence Ross, ladies and gentlemen, would be a better player right now for the Celtics if you wanted to go and get him? And you don't think somehow you can offer him the money he wants with $44 million? But if it's $129 million, then you're at $54 million available at that point. So, and it looks like we have our buddy in this situation. So, hey, Kev. So again, you're looking at a pretty big amount of money in this situation that would basically be available in this case. But again, if Marcus Smart is still here, a part of your Celtics, because of the fact that Marcus Smart ends up taking $18.5 million during that year because of what he gets paid, you're automatically reducing that $44 million in this case to $25 million. Or if it's $29 million, then you're reducing it maybe to a little bit more than that in this case. But you're really going to be putting yourself in a position where if it's 119, you ain't going to have the money to sign no mega superstar to come to Boston. So I would ask you, ladies and gentlemen, what would you prefer? You have time.
Danny, we have comments from our more comments from Jared Carson. I will read them and you guys can answer. First one is, I think it's time to bring Yam Madar to Boston. Rookie point guard that we drafted, he's playing for Partizan Belgrade, Euro Cup team, second competition in Europe. So, I mean, he's not bad, but do you really expect the rookie point guard to save the Boston Celtics franchise? It would be really nice, but he would need the time to develop here in Boston. And I like what he's doing in Partizan, but we will see about him. Maybe the others can say more about Yam Madar, especially Andy.
The thing to me with Yam is we brought him over before the season started, and for whatever reason, I'm not really clear whether he didn't want to stay in Boston and wanted to go back and play, and play for his team in Europe, or if Boston didn't want him to stay, or if it was like kind of a mutual thing. That's what I'm not really clear on. But to me,
I think it was mutual team.
I think it was mutual as well. That's the feeling I got, but there was never anything I don't think officially put out about it. So what doesn't make sense to me about that situation is that you basically sent a guy back who I agree. I think he has a lot of potential to develop into at least a useful role player. Probably with like a starter ceiling in the NBA. It's always important to temper expectations with people coming over from Europe or from overseas leagues because it's different. Obviously, it'd be nice if he morphed into the miniature version of Luka, but it's not realistic. I think he's probably ceiling at a starting point guard. But the thing to me is why did we send him back overseas and give all these minutes to a 1-year rental in Dennis Schroeder? And that's kind of what hasn't made sense to me about this team. Is like normally if you get a guy, like normally a professional franchise, if you get a guy who's 1-year rental, you usually are playing him in big minutes because you're contending. And that 1-year rental is a guy who's going to push you over. Like Kawhi Leonard was prime example on the Toronto Raptors. Obviously, they played him. You're going to play Kawhi over, OG Anunoby or however you pronounce his name, because because playing him makes you a contender, right? Dennis Schroeder does not make us a contender. He's having a good year, don't get me wrong, but he doesn't make you a contender. I don't think anybody's going to make that argument that Dennis Schroeder is the piece that's pushing us towards contention when we're sub 50, right? So why did we do that? Why do we, I guess that's the thing to me is why did we send somebody like Yam who could develop into a very useful piece for us? We send him back overseas to play a 1-year rental so we could be a sub 50 basketball team. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me because we're getting all the negatives that you get with trying to push for a title. The fact that you're not developing your young players and you're making heavy usage of guys that aren't going to be on the team for a very long time. So we're making all the sacrifices of a contending team. And we're getting all the results of a tanking team. We're not tanking hard enough. So we're basically going to land somewhere in the clutching arms of mediocrity. And I think anybody who's really followed professional sports would agree that mediocrity is probably one of the worst places to be. It's also one of the hardest places for us to get out of. Because when you're mediocre, you don't have good draft picks to use in trade. You don't have a lot of great players to use in trade. So it becomes very, very difficult to dig yourself out of that. And the way that you avoid mediocrity is, and I'm not saying that we should tank, because tanking implies we're deliberately losing games.
It's tanked
what I
by
think we
design.
should have done is
It's
we should have
tanked
been
by design.
we
tanked
should
by
have
design,
been giving these
right?
young players time. I don't think that's tanking by design, because I think you give a lot of these young players minutes and you use intelligent, i.e., not double big lineups.
Of course.
And I think you actually would probably have a similar or better record than we have now, ironically enough, because I think some of our record is because those lineups don't make sense. I'm not sure where we get the idea that playing two centers is, two centers, a shooting guard, and two wings is a really great idea. Like, I'm not sure where in a basketball coach's mind, in the modern NBA, where it's all about pace, space and pacing, right? I'm not sure where the modern basketball coach's mind's like, the league's all about pace and 3-point shooting. Let's play two centers that can't space the floor and are slow, or one of whom is slow. Is going to slow the team down. I'm not sure where that makes sense. But I know where it makes sense. In the minds of Ime Udoka and Brad Stevens, apparently it does make sense. But yeah, that's how I feel about Yam. Is I feel like we should have pushed to bring him over here. We should have been giving him minutes instead of Dennis Schroeder. Him and Peyton Pritchard both should be getting minutes instead of Dennis Schroeder and Josh Richardson. And we should have been developing these guys because they won't make a difference this year. If we had them this year, even if we'd had them from the start of the season, I doubt that we'd be significantly better than we are right now. But they could make a difference for us and be those quality role players that Igor, you've been talking about. They could be those quality role players in 2 to 3 years if we had brought them over here and invested the time in developing them.
Exactly.
Instead of playing 1-year rental, so we could be a losing team. I've never seen that before, where you play 1-year rental so you could have a losing record. That's like a New York Jets strategy right there, So. That's how I feel about Yam.
I must say that Andy and I wrote an article, The Dire Need to be Mediocre, one of the funniest articles that I wrote, and it is explaining a lot, actually. It is just an ironic title, and you can read it at Wibbit Green. Jared Carson said, like you said, Igor, Tank, Yam Mother would fit that bill. Perfect guy for tank by design. Also, he said, Brad didn't expect to be sub 500 basketball team this year. I have later 2 more comments from Jared for Daniel. Let's give word to Kevin. Kevin, what do you say about giving the young kids the space and time? And what do you say about bringing back Yam Mother, like our friend Jared Carson suggested?
I don't know. Watching the film on him overseas, I don't know if he's ready to come over here. I think if he would have came over here, he still would have been behind Pritchard in a sense. I think he would probably be the guard of the future for the Celtics. That be that guy that will pass first and shoot second. From watching this film, that's what I see from him. I think he needs to really develop on his mid-range shot for one. I think he needs to get a little bit bigger. But again, when you drafted him, I didn't understand why. Like what they basically did was they brought him over here, showed him to us, and they sent him back. Or if it was a mutual thing that they both wanted to go back. I don't know which one it was. But I think they adjusted the NBA pretty well. You look at the ones, look at Luka and the other dudes that come over here. They pretty much said it's easier than what they thought it was. So I don't know. I think that he will probably adjust well. But again, if they try to stash him over there because they think that if he comes here, he'd be a valuable trade piece. Now we're still looking for that point guard that we all want. That's a pass first guy. So let's say we were to bring him over here and he plays, and they go after Bradley Beal, and Bradley Beal says, "Okay, well, I want to do a sign and trade," and he might be the guy that might be in that sign and trade that maybe Boston didn't want to give up. So if you don't show a lot of him, then they don't got a lot of tape on him. They just got what they have overseas of him playing over there instead of playing here. So that could be my mindset also about him coming here. And the same thing with Begarin. Is that Begarin? Garin? The same with him. I would rather see him come over this year than Yam, because of the priorities that the Celtics need right now. The Celtics definitely need a point guard that passes first and shoots second. Talking to my friends, they're like, "Well, why don't you want Ben Simmons?" I'm like, "Well, Ben Simmons doesn't want to shoot. He's a great defender, but he can't shoot free throws either. So why we give up the farm to bring him to Boston? I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. As much as people will say that would be a good fit for us, Ben wouldn't even be the point guard with us. He'd probably be the 4 or 5. He would be in the paint closer because now he can't miss shots. We ain't got to ask shoot no jump shots. So that to me doesn't work for Boston, in my opinion. If that trade happens, I'm not going to be too happy about that, because again, now you're telling your fans, oh, even though we made the trade, we still ain't ready to be contenders again, because I don't think do for me either. But that's the only thing I can think of about Yam, is that they didn't want to show what he really could do in the NBA, because they didn't want him to be a bargaining tool to trade. Right now, you look at Boston and you look at Pritchard. Could Pritchard be a good backup on somebody's team? Yeah. Grant Williams, to me, I think Grant Williams probably has the highest trade value other than Marcus Smart, for real, on that team. We know the Brass team, they all look good with Boston. They go somewhere else and they don't play well. You know what I'm saying? So that's something else that you have to deal with. I want to touch on Daniel talking about the salary cap, and the money that we might have. So how many trade exceptions do we have now? Is it 3 or 4? Does anybody know? Or is it more than that?
I can search online. I think maybe 4 or more. Daniel, you have informations.
Right now, in terms of the ones that are really big in this situation, you have 3 in this case. The Celtics, I was actually just doing that, Kevin, when you brought it up. So obviously the Celtics have the Evan Fournier trade exception, ladies and gentlemen, that's valued at $17,142,857. That trade exception will expire August 17th of this year. Then, of course, they got the $9,720,900 trade exception for Tristan Thompson, the trade that sent him to with the Sacramento Kings. That will expire July 7th of this year. Then they got a $500,000 one with the Moses Brown trade that will expire on July 27th of this year. And then, of course, the one that just got made, which is worth $6.9 million in this case, for the deal that we just made with Hernan Gomez in this case, along that sent him obviously to the San Antonio Spurs or the Denver Nuggets in this case. So you got four, but three of them that are basically big.
Okay, so now let me ask you guys a question. If Boston uses those trade exceptions plus the money that they may have and the back end of the contract with the salary cap increasing, can they use that as a separate entity for certain players, or can they use that as can they use that as a per person as a player? So, like, say if we go after Bradley Beal, and there may be other players that would be involved in the trade, right? If we use, let's say, 2 or 3 trade exceptions, there would be other players from Washington that we would want to get, right? So
I think actually, Kevin, that you can use one of 3 trade exceptions. For example,
okay, so
Fournier one.
So you can use one for one player. For every trade exception, you can use it one for one player, right?
You can use a portion of one exception to one player,
Okay.
and the other portion of Fournier exception to another player. But you cannot combine one exception and second exception and third exception to trade for Beal.
Okay.
I think that those are the rules.
Okay, so I'm just trying to think of if this is the direction that they're looking and going, how they can make it happen, because we don't have a lot of trade value in a lot of players. Like I said, I think Grant Williams probably has the highest trade value other than Marcus Smart. And if I'm Boston, I'm not trading Marcus Smart to the Eastern Conference. I'm not doing that. You know what I'm saying? Because it's gonna play with fire every time he plays us. I'm out west, so I only see him 2 times a year, and that's it. So that's I'm just trying to think of why they're doing what they're doing, without telling us what they're doing. But we all know, we all got a kind of conception of what they're trying to do. But we just don't know what player they're trying to get to come to Boston. And now I know Bradley Beal did put out a list of teams he wants to go to now. But Washington won't let the list out unless he pays somebody $4 billion or $4 million to tell him the list. That's the only way probably we'll find out. But I know he just gave out a list of teams that he wants to go to. But my curious thing is it really Bradley Beal? Because I still have a dominant point guard with Tatum and Jalen, and we're not looking for that. We're looking for, in my opinion, I think we're looking for a knockdown shooter like a Ray Allen that we can count on to hit that 3 constantly in the clutch. We don't have nobody like that right now. So I'm curious a little bit. I mean, I'm just, you guys know how I feel. I think they're just privately they're tanking. Because you just can't, how you do what you did last night and lose the game at the end like that. I'm so confused. And Schrader didn't play last night, so that might have been.
Listen, Kevin. If Jason Tatum is missing those shots deliberately open for threes, then he is Harry Houdini, because it would take masterful job to miss all the open shots. Because if you shoot open for threes 10 times, for example, you will hit, for example, 3 times. Just not law of the big numbers. But he was missing all of them. So I mean, I don't know how to explain that a little joke, but you're totally correct, and unexplicable what is going on with the Boston lately.
And remember the guy? Remember it was last summer or summer before last when Jason hit like 22 in a row, 3-point shots. I mean, they hit dropping the bottom of the nets. I mean, when he touching the rim, all. And I'm like, now he's coming out here. He's not really not shooting very well. I mean, I think we said he was 1 for 22 the last 4 games at hitting threes. I heard of slumps, but man, I never saw a slump like this before. Because a shooter's going to shoot, but a shooter's going to make a shot and he's going to warm up and he's going to hit a streak. So like I said, man, I felt like that game when he's up by 37 points against the Knicks and they lost that game, I felt like at that point, to me, they're probably tanking to get a draft pick to move that draft pick around to get what they really, really want. And Boston is keeping it underneath the chin right now, exactly who they want. We think we know. We have an idea, you know, but nobody actually really knows because we need, like I said, we need a point guard and we need a shooter like Terry Ross. Like I think Terry Ross is one of the guys that can hit a jump shot consistently, but I don't know about in the clutch. But again, we're looking for somebody that's consistently like a Ray Allen type of guy that can hit the shot when it counts. Because we've seen Jaylen Brown can't do it, we've seen Jason can't do it. And we definitely know Schrader can't even hit it too when the clutch. We've seen him not do it. We've seen him try to do it too. So I'm really confused on what direction this team is going.
I don't think anybody knows what direction the team's going in. I don't think the owners know. I don't think the GM knows. I mean, I think that's the big problem with Boston is
I think they are doing their best to stay mediocre, because the money is incoming and the fans are happy just like a baby when you give them candy because they are watching homegrown players, the Boston blood.
I disagree. I think that the problem with Boston is what happened with the New York Knicks, about 10 years or so ago. And what the Knicks did, if anybody, I don't know if any of our viewers follow the Knicks, but what they did is they really just kind of, they basically got a collection of talent. They kind of, they go out there and say, oh, wow, this guy puts up good numbers, or this guy put up good numbers last season. Let's go and sign him. This guy put up good numbers last season. Let's go sign him, And they didn't really, they didn't really think about what their team concept was going to be, or they didn't think about their roster construction and how all of these different talents were going to fit together onto the floor. And I feel very much like that's what Boston has been doing, but especially since the 18-19 season, and when you look at 18-19 on up to today, that's what you see. It's, oh, wow, Kemba Walker's available. He's the best player on the market. We need to go and offer him a max contract so that we can get him on the Celtics. Oh, yeah, he doesn't really fit well with, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I don't care what fans say, oh, he was injured. He never fit well when he was healthy. He was a high-usage, pick-and-roll dependent scorer that made no sense next to Tatum and Brown. So that, we did that, and then we kind of, Evan Fournier, we could get him using the trade exception, and that wasn't bad because we really didn't give anything up to get Fournier. But we're going to get him. And once again, though, we're not really thinking about how this whole roster is going to work because we're just adding a fourth scorer onto a roster with 3 guys who do nothing but score. And so now we just added a fourth guy to fight for touches. And I'm kind of worried that that's what Boston is doing. We're just looking for the big name talent. You'll go say, oh, Bradley Beal's available. Let's go get Bradley Beal because he's a big name. He's a good player. Surely he's going to fix what's wrong. But what's wrong with the team is that we don't really have a concept. I keep talking about this on the We Bleed Green Celtics fan page. I keep talking about it on here. We're a team that has drafted and signed free agents like we are a small team. You look at who we've signed: Dennis Schroeder, Josh Richardson, guys we've drafted: Romeo Langford, Grant Williams, Aaron Naismith, Peyton Pritchard, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. You notice the trend here. We're drafting players that fit into a small ball lineup. And then we go and we say, oh, we're going to go play two centers in big minutes. Because, I know Al Horford was a power forward before. He's 35 years old. He looks slower than he did before. He is a center now. And he's not really spacing the floor very well this year either. Last I looked, he was hovering right around 30% from beyond the arc. So once again, we're saying that, okay, well, where was the concept on this team? What is the concept? What is the strategy? Because we draft and sign like we're small. And then we want to play double big lineups when we only have two centers that see significant minutes on the roster. So that's kind of why I go back to when people talk about the direction of the Boston Celtics. And that's why I kind of say, well, what direction? Because there is no direction. We're all over the place. It like I said at the start of the show, we have, it's like the coach is the coach is over here. The front office is over here, and the ownership's up here just saying, I don't really give a shit what happens as long as I sell tickets. And that's kind of what this team feels like to me. And I think that when you have that amount of, I don't know if that's dysfunction is not really the right word, but lack of direction, that's going to bleed down to your players. Because these players get here. And, with guys like Enes Freedom come in, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum have been here for a while, but the same problem. You're there and you're like, well, what's my role? Players want to know what their role on a team is. I think anybody who's played sports before at almost any level, high school on up, it makes them, you want to know what your role is. You want to know what you're supposed to be doing. Like, where do you fit on this team? Why are you important to this team? What do you need to do for this team? And when you have a team that doesn't have a concept, doesn't have an overarching strategy, you get there and it's kind of like, well, I don't really have a role. And that gives you kind of confusion. It's hard for you to really look at focusing on one thing to improve or to be good at because you don't really know what you're supposed to be doing. And that's kind of where Boston is right now. And I think that explains some of the issues with the players that we, with the play of the guys on the court too, because they don't really have like a clearly defined role or clearly defined place on this team. And the other thing, just one other thing I did want to bring up real quickly, just going back to the shooting struggles, I think Dave Hopla did a really good job of breaking down, some of the bad shooting that we've seen from the different Celtics players. And, for the people who don't know, Dave Hopla is probably one of the greatest, if not, I would say the greatest shooting coach in the NBA, period, in basketball, period. You could go and look him up, and the guy has so many accolades. He's taught so many great shooters, including Kobe, Melo. His track record speaks for itself. He's the best shooting coach in basketball. And the one thing that's common, that's like a common theme with all of our players that he's looking at, I think he was looking at our players in the Clippers game. But the one common thing, or two common things that come through: bad footwork and lack of consistency in how they're shooting, their actual shot mechanics, their shot motion. And when you have two things that are very common, two things that are common denominators across all of these guys, including Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, Marcus Smart even, so these are all the guys who are playing starter minutes, and you have these common problems. Well, when you have inconsistent shot mechanics and inconsistent footwork, to me, normally that tells me that you're not training. Because to me, and granted, my background isn't in basketball. My background, I did mixed martial arts for a while, and then I've shot a bit shooting instructor, in terms of firearms, a firearms instructor. But when I see people who have poor mechanics or inconsistent mechanics and bad footwork, what that tells me is that you're not practicing, because those are the things that you learn and perfect because you're through repetition, through muscle memory. And those are things that people don't look at. Those are the things that go overlooked because, especially with like firearms or with fighting, everybody's focused on throwing punches, takedowns, pulling the trigger. But your footwork is incredibly important for determining how your body is going to square properly onto your target. Yeah, I'm 99% sure that shooting a basketball is very similar, because most of the time, if you're shooting anything, throwing, shooting anything, how you set your feet is very important to dictating your accuracy, because it dictates how the rest of your body is going to move. And so to me, that's telling me that as a team, they're not practicing this. They're not getting these things to be muscle memory. And I think that may be a big part of the problem with the offense. Sorry, I don't mean to go on that tangent, but that's something that I've noticed. And we've all been talking about the offensive problems and the regression in shooting. And I think that might hold a big key for it, because I don't think that they are practicing the very small, minute, but foundational details of how they're shooting. And I think that's why we're seeing that regression.
I want to read an article because it is very telling one. And before that, I just want to add that, we have an interesting load of comments. I don't know if we're going to get to mention all of them. Robert Parrish commented, Jace. Also, I listened at CLNS All Access, interesting interview with Gary Washburn, and he put it interesting answer to a question, because the host asked Gary Washburn, Sherrod Blakely, if I'm correct. He asked Gary Washburn, what do you think the Celtics should do? Be buyers or the sellers at the trade deadline? He said, well, probably stay the pat or be buyers. And Sherrod asked, why? Do you think they can make a playoff push? Well, not so much like first round exit, but if we sell the players, it would depress the fan base. So I don't think they will do it. This is the key word of what is going on, in my modest opinion, with the Celtics and their ownership. What they are doing everything to protect their own positions and to make the money circulating into their pockets and to save the money. On one hand, they're doing all the moves just tax-wise. The ball move was simply tax-wise because, they get under the tax line. So they're missing every single opportunity. Like Daniel was talking, I will give the word later to him to continue his story about the free agents. And he mentioned Terrence Ross. Jared Carson, our friend at the page, agrees that we should look at Terrence Ross as one of the free agents. Terrence Ross is not going to save the Celtics. Neither is Jeremy Grant or the names that have been mentioned. But those are the small improvements. So if you miss every single opportunity as an organization on the free agency market to make a small improvements every single day, to make a trades, Red Auerbach was saying, do a trade if you're getting the best player at the trade. Trade everybody except Jace from me if you're getting the better player at the trade. Make a small improvements, or trade the young player at the peak and get the experienced player that can help us. But we're missing every single opportunity to make small improvements every day. All we care is to get under the tax line, despite we are not in the danger to be the tax repeating team until 2025. And we are doing everything to please the fan bases, because if we sell the veterans and if we do what we should do, hit the rebuilding button, oh, we're going to upset our sensitive fan base. Do you know how much I care what the fan base is thinking right now about the team? Zero. Why? Because without any insult, the fan base, majority of them, I really appreciate the crowd in TD Garden. I think it's best basketball public in the world. But worldwide, the fan base is full of people that are not understanding how NBA and running organization is working. So that's what our owners are caring about, not to upset the fan base because it will stop the money flow into their pockets. Well, Bill Simmons blasts his beloved Boston Celtics about developing the young players. Quote, while the stars like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown shouldering the load, Boston isn't getting much assistance from many of its younger players. The lack of production recently drew the ear of longtime sports writer and Celtics fan Bill Simmons, who said that Boston is not using and developing youths well compared to the most successful teams around the league. The Celtics aren't giving young players much playing time. Chris Mannix from NBC Sports Boston said play Pritchard, Langford, and Naismith. Ime Udoka needs to make a change in lineup. No intensity from this group. Just make casual passes. Bring all the young guys and see what they can do. In general, the Celtics are a young team. Tatum 23, Brown 25, Marcus Smart 27. So it's not as if the majority of the team's minutes go toward AARP members. But Boston has little use plethora of young guys wasting away at the bench. Romeo Langford and Aaron Naismith are two examples. Romeo Langford 14 overall in back-to-back years, and Naismith 22 years all guard. Romeo taken 14th, Romeo Langford, less than 5 points per game of the bench. Grant Williams and Peyton Pritchard are two the first rounders from 2019 and 2020, average single-digit points, very limited minutes. Out of the 8 players drawing more than 20 minutes, Williams is one of the 3 or fewer years of experience. But the 4-year power forward, Grant Williams, is still getting fewer minutes, 22.6, than journeyman Josh Richardson, 25.8 in coach's Udoka rotation. That is what I'm talking about. Unexcusable. The minutes Udoka could be given to his young players are, instead of going to the group of 6 veterans, Tatum, Brown, Smart, Dennis Schroeder, Robert Williams, Al Horford, each of 29 minutes or more per game. In addition, Dennis Schroeder have started every contest he has appeared in. Bill Simmons is questioning how the Celtics use and develop their recent draft picks. It's hard to believe that after multiple years of standing uselessly in the corner on every possession, getting repeatedly buried from the minute standpoint, and never being empowered to do a single thing offensively, that Aaron Naismith and Romeo Langford hasn't gotten better. And if you look to the way Memphis Grizzlies or Golden State Warriors are developing their young players versus what is happening to Boston, it's pretty clear that something is broken in the Celtics organization, and they are doing this wrong, period, end of story. Few will claim that Langford and Naismith should be everyday starters, but it is concerning how Boston recently lottery picks has produced so little during their time here. And Bill Simmons was infurious. The examples of Golden State Warriors and Memphis further enhanced Simmons' points. For example, the Warriors have MVP candidate in Steph Curry, but they wouldn't be top team of the league without receiving steady contribution from Jordan Poole, his 2019 first-round pick, Damian Lee, Gary Payton's second, Toscano Anderson, and James Wiseman, and the others. Meanwhile, Ja Morant has helped the Grizzlies 31-15 to turn the corner. They wouldn't be the treat without 2020 first-round pick Desmond Bain, whom we drafted and traded that pick, if I'm correct. Also, 25th and under homegrown player Jared Jackson Jr., Dillon Brooks, point guard, and Anthony Melton, taking major steps in their development. The Boston Celtics could use the trade deadline to make a room for their youngsters because Dennis Schroeder, Smart, Richardson, especially Schroeder, repeatedly mentioned in the league sources in trades, according to Jared Weiss. So we will see what will happen. Boston made a deal acquiring PJ Dozier and Bob Ball with Nuggets and Spurs in 3 teams deal, but the trades might not stop here. According to The Athletic, Boston is open to move Horford, Richardson, and Schroeder before the 10th February deadline. Moving those veterans would work 2 ways. Firstly, the Celtics would be able to get under the luxury tax, considering the 3 vets combined making around $44 million, with Horford and Richardson off the books next year for at least $27 million. The Celtics will have significant financial reasons to offload them. Secondly, clearing the spots for Langford, Naismith, Pritchard, and Williams, underutilized players. The Celtics have spent a better part of last decade stockpiling draft picks, placing themselves into inviolable positions of competing for the title while maintaining draft capital. But those picks are useless if the Celtics aren't going to give those players the time to flourish. Of course, the time passing won't be the solution. Tatum and Brown will have to change their playing style and sacrifice production to a degree. Udoka will have to incorporate a few players in a way the best serves them. But Bill Simmons points accurately out whatever Boston is doing simply is not working. Daniel, I cut your story, Terrence Ross. Okay, so Daniel, cut your story. You was talking about Terrence Ross and the free agents. Let me see. Jared Carson said Terrence Ross will cost chump change. They could trade for him this year if they wanted. Also, Jared is thinking that if Danny Ainge wants Marcus Smart, he will be traded to Utah. Okay, so Danny, what can you say? Please continue your story.
I just want to say, before people talk about trading for Terrence Ross, the guy's shooting 31% from beyond the arc. So I'm not sure where people are getting the idea that going out to get a 31% shooter is going to somehow magically solve our offensive issues. I'm not really clear on where that happens. He's a career 36% shooter, but he has been traditionally pretty hot and cold. Like, he'll have really good nights, he'll have really bad nights. We have enough guys who do that. I don't think that I don't think you could really call him a knockdown shooter. So I think fans need to understand that. He has good games against Boston, and I think that's where the idea comes from fans, because we only see him when he plays against Boston. But he's definitely not a consistent knockdown shooter. I think that's something fans need to realize.
Danny, explain please your idea until the end before we cut you.
Yeah. So again, first, he's right when it comes to the thing of Danny Ainge. If Danny Ainge wants, one of our guys, it's pretty likely that unless it's Time Lord or Tatum or Brown, there's a pretty good chance the deal will happen in this case, because I think Danny Ainge left with some decent, roots still left here in Boston in this case. And so some sort of move, it's kind of like what we saw with Danny Ainge and some of these former, Celtic teammates he had that are still GMs in other locations in this situation. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours in this situation. You know how many people have said this. There's controversy in this league in this situation. Danny Ainge will call on, hey, you owe me basically for that $50 basically, or me paying your dinner the other night. A lot of people like to joke about that in this situation. Hey, I remember you looking up that little skirt in this situation. I didn't rat you out, literally. So I wouldn't be surprised if Danny Ainge wanted Marcus Smart and he pretty much called up Brad and said, hey, I'm willing to give you a decent deal. I want Marcus. You give me Marcus. I give you something decent in exchange in this situation that could probably help you along, even if the fans in Utah don't think it's really, really good. I'll be able to spin it to basically make them think it's good in this situation. So, literally, if he wants it, it's going to happen in this situation because Boston might just feel they're indebted to Danny Ainge because if it wasn't for what Danny Ainge did when he was here, a championship never comes to Boston, in all likelihood. That's the truth in this case. Now, when it comes to Terrence Ross, I'm just saying there are plenty of players out there, ladies and gentlemen, better than what you currently got as role players. That's the key word, role players. If you can't get the superstar you want in this situation to join this team, but yet you got close to $50 million in cap space, then there are definitely a lot more better role players on that free agency market that you could end up getting to basically join forces with Tatum and Brown and basically try to do this again, turn back the clock and try it all over again in this case. Now, you guys brought up Bradley Beal. I'll use the situation with the Washington Wizards, should I say, as a perfect example of what we could be looking at in this situation if the Celtics were to basically make a move as of this point in the situation. Because Bradley Beal is one of those that would be kind of a special circumstance because of the way his contract is currently set up in this case. Bradley Beal, you guys, his contract actually expires after this season. So, again, you could get him in 2023 because his contract has a player option for next year. So he could opt to basically reject that player option and go into free agency this summer, which means you wouldn't get him in this case, unless he was to actually try to do a signing trade deal and get traded over here. Because obviously you don't have the cap space this summer to sign him, flat out. But if you guys were to look at the Wizards contract situation going forward, remember what I said earlier, you guys, when I said the Celtics virtually have no one on the books other than Tatum, Time Lord, and Brown set up for that year, 2023, 2024? Well, the Wizards, you guys, are kind of in the same circumstance right now in this case. If Bradley Beal was to basically say, bye-bye, see you later in this situation to the Washington Wizards, they would virtually have only Spencer Dinwiddie, Davis Bertans, Daniel Gafford, and Isaiah Todd as the only ones on their books right now for that season. Literally. That's how it's shaping up. Everybody else on that team, in this case, is currently going to be a free agent. Now, Kyle Kuzma would be having a player option, so he could force them to pay him $13 million for that year, or reject it and go to the free agency market. They have a couple players who they got the team option on in this case, so they can force them to stay if they wanted to. But it would be more, smart just to reject those options and take the cap space in this situation and basically try to get players in the free agency market. So if I'm the GM of the Washington Wizards, guys, and I'm looking at, let's say, Bradley Beal going after this season, and I know there's a possibility I might lose him, I might try to consider making a deal where maybe I get a team that might have players who are set to expire soon, maybe for 2023 also, and maybe offer Bradley Beal, if Bradley Beal is willing to basically go to that team and ask them, okay, we'll give you Beal, but you got to take some of these other guys as well. And in exchange, you give us all those contracts that are set to expire. Like, let me ask you three in this situation. Spencer Dinwiddie, would you say he's better than any of these guys we have right now? Meaning Schroeder, Richardson, Marcus Smart. So if I had to ask you, let's say I'm the general manager of the Wizards, and you three, any one of you, you're Brad Stevens right now, and I tell you, okay, you want to make a deal for Bradley Beal, basically, and Bill seems like he's willing to go to Boston. You basically get Bradley Beal, and you get Spencer Dinwiddie from me. You take Spencer Dinwiddie in this case, and you probably take Davis Bertans, and in exchange, you come back and you end up giving me in this situation Bogdanovich. You take Al Horford in this situation as well. You take I'll take Josh Richardson in this case. I take Langford and some of these other guys who are all gonna expire after 2022-2023. So literally, you're giving up everybody you're gonna lose after next season in exchange for Bertans, Beal, and Dinwiddie. Would you three take it if you're Brad Stevens in this case?
Kevin.
I would make a deal. I'm looking at that deal. And, I'm giving up more than we have Bradley Beal, who they want, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Perdant, or whatever his name is. Pretend. So at this time, I don't know what the league looks like at that time, but you can look and say that, Eastern Conference Finals, we had to fill that roster. Now you're at the point, social yellow Boston. I'm coming with you guys because I know what you got. Will probably be a scenario I would think that would happen with Boston if that would be the case. So I definitely would have. I would go with it for real. Go with it any way I could because I think that you get players that want to come in there, take us and play with those guys because they know the potential that they would have. And you're looking at a team that's young and they have, so you can add. You can really like okay, they can be in finals the next 2 out of 3 years or 3 out of the next 4 years. And you might get some players that come and go, but your main rotation will stay because now you're giving guys a ring. So take that and run.
Okay, Andy, about that potential trade that Danny mentioned with Washington, what you would do?
Yeah, so I'm not. Obviously I would do it, but I don't see why the Wizards would ever do that. I mean, they're trading two guys on one really good guy, one kind of role player, and they'd be trading them for a bunch of guys who are a lot less good on expiring contracts. So I'm not really sure. I don't think anybody would touch Al Horford's contract with a 10-foot pole at this point. I mean, that contract, I'm not. I like the idea of bringing Horford back to Boston, but I don't think that contract is particularly movable. I don't think there's really any team. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I don't think there's any team in the NBA that's going to pay that much money for a 35-year-old center. I just, who's having a career awful year shooting from beyond the arc. I just don't see it happening. Obviously, talent-wise, I think talent-wise, that's pretty undebatable. But I think we go back to the problem with Boston. There's not a lot on that roster that's really interesting. I mean, if I was the Wizards, I would say you're giving me Schroeder, Smart, Langford, and probably I would if I was going to trade you Bradley Beal from Washington, I would be demanding probably Time Lord or Jalen in return. I mean, you're probably not going to get it because everybody knows Beal's coming up on the end of his contract anyway. But I mean, if I'm trading Bradley Beal as the Wizards, I'm at least starting off the same place the Sixers were with Simmons, where you're giving me an all-star in return, or you're not getting a call back. And I think that's the problem with Boston is, what are we going to do? What are we going to do because when teams are going to trade a superstar, they're going to ask for an all-star in return.
Well, that's where basically Beal would now have the power if you're the Celtics, if you make this move with Smart and Schroeder going to Utah for Bogdanovich. At that point, you basically would be able to tell them, one way or another, if Beal wants to come to Boston, we're going to be able to get him, with you or without you. We can either get him in free agency in 1 year if he basically goes to you with the player option in this situation, since he's got, I'm correct, a no trade clause, so you can't trade him obviously to a team he doesn't want to go to. Mm-hmm. Or in this situation, you can trade him to us right now, and you be the one that gets all that salary cap space, and you can be the one that's the major player in this situation in 2023 in the free agency market in this case. So you're giving them the option basically not to lose Beal for anything, and they can get all that cap space to basically try to rebuild the roster in this situation, because everybody knows the moment they lose Beal, the Wizards basically ain't going to be no threat in this situation, even with Dinwiddie and Bertans in this situation in this case. And there ain't nobody coming over to Washington. They're going to have to do it the way the Warriors did and all that, which is building up the next superstar in this case. So if you offer them that opportunity and you basically tell them straight up, one way or another, he's coming, and Bradley Beal tells them that as well. One way or another, I'm going to Boston now that they got the cap space to get me there in 2023. They're going to have to take it if they don't want to lose him for nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
right, but that's making the assumption that Beal is saying I'm only going to go to Boston, whereas what Kev said earlier about him giving a list to the Wizards suggests that there's a lot of other destinations, and if you're Washington and you're rebuilding, what you're looking for, I agree with you. I don't think any free agents are going to go to Washington. I mean, I don't think anybody is going to go there, willingly. But I think the problem that you run into then is if they're rebuilding, they're looking to, they're going to have to build a superstar up the ground. So they're going to look to a team that's going to give them draft capital. And that's what we don't have right now in terms of getting that. And so like getting the players they can salary, they'll salary dump. Yeah, that clears up cap space for them. But if they're developing a player that, if they have to develop a player from the ground up, cap space really means very little to them. What they would be looking to do is take on people's bad contracts in return for getting draft capital back. And that's the problem for Boston is we don't really have draft capital to give. Now, if Beal says I'm only going to go to Boston, that obviously changes the equation. But I think in that case, we get Beal pretty much no matter what anyway. Yeah. So I think I guess the problem for me then is that with Beal, if he's given a list to Wizards management, that suggests that there are multiple teams that he's willing to consider. Now, I'm guessing that Philly might be one of those teams. Yeah. And if you're Boston, I'm not sure bringing in Bogdanovich and then having a bunch of salary dump contracts is going to be more attractive than, say, what Philly can offer with guys like Tybal, Shake Milton, Tyrese Maxey, Andre Drummond. Like Philly, I don't even think it matters what trade we make at this point. I think Philly, unless we offer up one of the Jays, Philly blows us out of the water with a potential trade package. and they could do it because you take any combination of Maxey, Milton, Tybal, Drummond, they get Beal, they are still quantifiably a much better team than they were before.
You look at the 76ers in this case, practically other than Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid, everybody on their side also expires after next season. So they're pretty much stuck in the same boat that we are at this point. So they're not going to give up Joel Embiid to get Bradley Beal in this situation. And unless they're going to give up Tobias Harris in this case, or unless the Wizards are willing to basically take Ben Simmons at this point, there ain't nobody on that team in this situation that would really make it worth the Wizards' while to basically take, that would be any different than the Celtics giving up the guys they got, knowing that
there is a difference. Because the difference is that those are young guys like Maxey, Milton, that you could then talk to. Like before you made the trade, you would as a GM in Washington, you would talk to those guys and see what their commitment level is, see what they would be looking for in the off season. Those are all things they would do as part of their due diligence. And with young guys like that, that's something you would do. But like when we talk about giving up Horford, nobody's real. I find it highly doubtful they would want to even explore the option of re-signing Horford. Going, he'll be 36, 37 at that point, I think. He's not Tom Brady. We've all seen him getting older. So yeah, I guess that's the thing. Like, I'm not adverse to trading, Smart or Schroeder to Utah. But I don't know if I would really go for Bogdanovich, to be honest. I don't.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know if that's.
Like I was saying in the group, it's more the contract in this situation.
Right.
Let me.
I get that it's the contract, but I guess the thing for me is, I think clearing cap space is useful for us because I don't like that contract that we gave to Smart. But I think I'd rather target teams with more assets that we can make use of. So, I've talked a lot about the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks have been awful defensively. They really need a defender. That might be somewhere where we could they have kind of a logjam with Hunter, Reddish, Bogdanovich. It's Bogdanovich, just to clarify. Porter. And they have this real bottleneck there. And those are young guys. If we could spring loose like a DeAndre Hunter type of trade in exchange for Smart, Schroeder, some combination thereof, that I think that would be beneficial to us. We'd still be dumping the salary, but we'd be getting somebody who's younger. We can develop, kind of fits a positional need in some ways because Hunter can slot as a small forward, which would let us push Tatum to power forward more often. Give us the ability to run a faster, smaller lineup. I think that would be something I'd be more interested in. The other thing is I'm kind of leery about trading with Danny Ainge because, we used to have that thing with, when he was the Celtics GM, that it seemed like other GMs always seemed to lose trades when it came to trading with Danny. And so I'm kind of leery about jumping into a trade that Danny's offering because, the history tells us that usually makes the other GM come away with egg on their face. And Brad Stevens is pretty good at getting egg on his face. So when you combine those factors, I'm not 100%.
Don't make a deal with the devil, man. Don't make a deal with the devil, man.
Well, and that's the thing. Danny knows our roster. He knows Jazz's roster. Stevens only knows our roster. And Danny's been doing this a lot longer than Brad has. So I'm not really. Danny Ainge would probably be one of the last GMs I would want Brad Stevens to be trying to cut deals with because I just feel like that's going to be doomed to failure.
Yeah. So again, the main thing is.
Can I ask you that?
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
What do you guys think about James Harden? Do you think he could fit with Jason and Jalen?
Yeah, definitely. James Harden is James Harden. He could help us. But again, guys, my biggest worry, like I'm writing you at the group, and I really hope it is just my fear, unjustified fear. So the best way how to be the true contenders, we all agree, is to get the third star. We mentioned Bill, we mentioned Harden. I mean, everybody of all-star caliber would help. Of course, point guard would fit better than the shooting guard that is, wasting field goal attempts, because we have the two guys that wants to shoot a lot in Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. Anyway, what I want to say is the biggest fear of getting the third star is again ownership. Now, if we are the New York Knicks or Los Angeles Lakers, we would not have this kind of conversation, because automatically their ownership is going to go deep into the text line, whether they are contenders or not. Our owner showed us with ball move, at least this season, what is his thinking about this team, and what is his goal this season, to stay under the text line. And I don't think that we can hope for improvements of the team, radical improvements, at least right now at the trade deadline. I hope that I'm wrong, and I hope that they will do blockbuster trade. I would be very happy, but I really doubt it would happen. So what I'm trying to say, Kevin, is that there is no sense in bringing in the James Harden alongside Jace if our ownership group is not willing to support our core with good team. If you give Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, and James Harden a bunch of dummies alongside them, this team would still fail, despite having 3 all-star guys and 1 top 5 player. Do you understand me? So if you have Ime Udoka, and if you have like 9 dummies alongside them, cheap contracts and bad players, role players, it doesn't matter if you get James Harden. Even LeBron James. I mean, LeBron James could not win with this group of the Celtics players, role players. At least that's my opinion.
Well, I'm
Maybe
thinking
the guys will not agree.
I'm for
Maybe the guys will not agree.
I'm fast forwarding to the end of the season. That's what I'm thinking, free agent wise, because he didn't sign a contract extension with Houston. I mean, with Brooklyn Nets. And the feeling I get is that he don't want to be there no more, because he can't count on Kyrie to play, and Kevin Durant stays hurt all the time. So when he went there, he felt like it's going to be an easy fit for him, that he had to do less, but he's doing just as much as he was doing in Houston as he's doing as he is in Brooklyn right now. And I think he probably got a little bit tired of that, and he don't want to deal with the shenanigans. So I know Philly going to probably make a real hard push for him as well. But I'm just thinking, if Boston did want him, but they wanted Jalen Brown, he said, "We're not giving you Jalen Brown. That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen." So I'm thinking, because if you get James Harden on the team, then that kind of pushes you away from finding that pure point guard you have, because he leads your teams in assists, so he does pass the ball. So I think that's a plus. That would be a plus for Boston. You just might want to find another guard out there that maybe could take over if he had to take over, or a 2 guard that don't have to, but just play great defense. That's just my mind thought in the future going forward. If that's something that I'm just thinking that he could be. To me, James Harden is a needle mover more than Bradley Beal. Because he does lead the team in assists. But go ahead, Daniel. Go ahead.
Well, I agree with you on those points. The only thing with James Harden is that his contract expires after this season in this case. And so he goes to 47. He does have a player option, which would pay him $47,366,760 if he wanted to stay with them in this case for one more season. So the thing is, how likely do you guys think the Brooklyn Nets would be in trying to aid him to come to another team in the Eastern Conference in this case if he wanted to leave in this case? I would think if you're the Brooklyn Nets,
let me ask you the question: do you think, without giving up Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, that we have the trade package that will convince the Brooklyn Nets, without involving the third team, to give us James Harden?
We wouldn't pursue him in trade. We would pursue him in the offseason is what we would do. That's the only way we would get that done. It would require our ownership to pay heavily probably into the tax, and we'd have to find ways to offload Horford for sure and Smart as well, I believe. But I think it would be worth it. And if James Harden said, I wanted to come to Boston, I would do what you had to do to clear that cap space. And, I would hit Mike over the head as many times as necessary until he woke up and smelled the coffee and, and was willing to pay the tax, because I think James Harden does move the needle. I think that you could run James Harden, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Grant Williams, and Time Lord, and I think that's a roster that could go a very, very long ways. So, yeah, I agree with you, Kev. I think James Harden is a much better option, but we would have to get him in free agency, and we'd have to clear the cap space to do it.
Yeah, because again, $119 million is what you're looking at for next season. In this case, as the salary cap limit in this situation. And like you said, the Brooklyn Nets, they ain't no way in hell they're going to look to help anybody in the Eastern Conference to try and take James Harden from them in this situation. If anything, they're going to want you to have to sacrifice the guys you got in this situation, unless they know you're going to give them a superstar in exchange. And again, now, if you can't trade Horford, you can basically terminate his contract, but you would be paying, I think it's $12 million or $14 million that would still be on the books in this situation. So it's not like you're going to be able to remove his entire amount from your salary book in this situation. Again, this is where another reason why you would have to basically get rid of Marcus Smart's deal in this situation, because that's $17 million. And then on top of it, again, he makes $44 million right now. So if obviously you're going to have to be looking at paying him close to $50 million next year in this situation. That's probably where he's going to be looking to go, somewhere close to that amount if he's making $44 million right now. So you're going to be looking at somewhere between those two amounts, $44 to $47 million, maybe a little bit above that in this case. So $17 million for Marcus Smart's going to have to go his way in this situation. You would have to remove Josh Richardson, get him removed somewhere else to get another $12 million in this case. And that would be, $29 million at that point. So you're really looking at a real high amount. The $11 million, you're probably going to save $14 million around from Horford. So it's doable in this situation, but you are going to have to get, like Andy said, several other teams who are going to have to go the route of taking your players who are going to be on your roster for next year as of right now. And one thing, as we just said with the deal to Utah, those teams, whenever they do those things for you, always want something extra in exchange, which is why the deal to Utah also had 2 second-round picks apparently being requested by Utah on top of Schroeder and Marcus Smart in this case, because they knew they were doing the Celtics a favor by giving them the free agency space in this situation, by taking a long-term contract off the Celtics books in this situation. So any team you get that's going to basically look to take, let's say, Al Horford from you in this situation is going to basically want something extra in this case. Any team that takes Josh Richardson in this situation. And the bad thing is, you're going to have to do it by next month. That's the other thing in this case, obviously. Because obviously you can't trade Josh Richardson at the end of the season for a player who doesn't exist in this case. So if they were to go after James Harden, they would have to do it right now in this situation. Or obviously do it for draft picks in this situation at the end of the season in this case. and hopefully those things can be done. Maybe for people who have traded player exceptions, but not too many teams have traded player exceptions right now. The Celtics seem to be the king of traded player exceptions right now in the league at this point.
And let me say this real quick. And this is what really bothers me, because when we looked at the roster last year and we said we have an opportunity to go after Bradley Beal this season if we wanted to, but then they come back and they sign Langford, they sign Williams, they sign Grant, they sign Marcus Smart, and so now we're looking at like, oh my God, what are you doing now? Because now you basically told us this year we're not doing anything, and also, and almost next year you're saying to us, oh, don't worry about it, we're not going to do anything next year, but the following year after that, we might be able to do something. I'm 50. I'll be 57 in February. I can't wait 2 more years. I don't know if I'm guaranteed 2 more years. You know what I'm saying? So I really don't get that, because at the end of last year we were talking like, okay, they're gonna have cap space. If they want to get Bradley Beal, they can get him. But then they went and signed all those people to contract extensions. And Marcus Smart was the biggest one. I was really surprised about the Romeo Langford signing. And I was really surprised about Robert Williams signing too, because we know he hasn't been healthy. I mean, he's playing more now this year than he's been in the last 2 or 3 years he's been here. So I was really shocked at what they did. I'm like, what in the devil are they doing? I'm sitting there saying, so you want to make us believe that this roster right here, you felt like this roster could contend to be a 1, 2, 3, or 4 team in this conference, and we see where we're at right now. So again, I'm confused, not confused, confused of what they're trying to.
I don't think that, Kevin, we can say for sure what they're trying to do until summer, and we will see about the trade deadline. I have actually the great article from Clutch Points guys that is kind of attached with what, Kevin, you asked about James Harden and lack of point guard. From Clutch Points, writer is Nihad Žunić. Probably Bosnian guy. He said the 2 big reasons for the Celtics struggles this year, and Andy would love this. Number 1, rookie coach. Number 2, lack of true point guards, which is something that we were talking. But listen to the interesting stats. With all due respect to Udoka, he's appeared a bit overmatched this season. After Brad Stevens stepped down as a coach to become Celtics general manager, the fans of the franchise knew they couldn't expect superior replacement. What they got, however, has been much worse. Stevens was master of in-game strategy, and a team looked great playing under him. While there were some chemistry issues under Stevens, that was mostly due to his to how the roster was assembled. He wasn't the Celtics architect. Now those chemistry issues don't really exist, but Boston on court state is abysmal. While no one had the Celtics winning the championship this year, no one expected this team to be sub 500 with 2 All-Stars, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and to struggle that much. Udoka's biggest flaws as a coach come in clutch situations. Right now, the Celtics are woefully 9-17 in games in which the score is within 5 points the last 2 minutes. That's usually the mark of inexperienced teams, so it's logical that San Antonio Spurs, New Orleans Pelicans, Orlando Magic, Detroit Pistons also struggling in clutch. However, the Celtics are not young. Tatum 23, but he already had 4 full seasons under his belt as a team leader. Brown is 25, but playing his 6th year. The Celtics have the real issue with who is finishing their games, a problem that can usually be traced back to the coaches. More experienced coach would know to calm down their team down and draw up the plays for easy points at the clutch. With Udoka at the helm, Boston may always have to worry about collapsing down in the fourth period. Number 2, lack of true point guard. Surprisingly enough, the Celtics are not dead last in the league in terms of assists, even though they don't have the real playmaker. However, they are still occupying the 22nd spot in assists, which is not good. With Dennis Schroeder and Marcus Smart as the point guards on the roster, plus Peyton Pritchard, that was to be expected. Smart is a great defensive player with expanding offensive game, but he is not a true passer. He is averaged 5.7 assists per game, and this season it dropped to the 5.3 assists per game. Schroeder is similar to Smart in terms of both not being willing passer. He is a scorer. He is a scorer first, and he has not been that kind of a player ever since he entered the league. Schroeder is 4.7 assists per game. It is less than Smart and second best at the roster, and it's a damning indictment of the roster. Tatum and Brown aren't natural passes, both preferring to be finishers or involved in isolation plays. The playmaking issues is reflecting in more than just per assist numbers. With a true facilitator and ball distributor, an offense lives and breathes much more better. Without that type of player, the coach's message to the team might be lost, and the Stars easily fell victim to relying on their individual talents. The Celtics actually run the second most isolation plays in the league per NBA, and the Celtics need to be active at the trade deadline in search of the true floor general. With the established playmaker in town, the Celtics will be able to get both Tatum and Brown in better scoring positions and making life easier on the offense as a whole. I think that this article is spot on both notes. I want to hear your opinion, Andy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that, I think needing a playmaker is one of the biggest things. And I also think that Udoka was not really the best person for the job. Yeah, I mean, I think that really it's sort of a combination of things. And, I think that article sort of alluded or touched on it. But, it's goes back to what I think we've all been saying for a while now, where, you have all these different small to mid-sized issues that we've all been pointing out. I think each of us kind of focuses maybe on some different things, and there's some things that we all agree on, but really I think what you're seeing this season is, I guess you would say, sort of like a culmination of all these things, these small and mid-sized things.
The complex of problems. It's not one problem,
Yeah.
It's complex.
It's basically everything's just kind of come to a head this year. It's sort of, if you think about building a house, if you skimp on the foundation and then you skimp on the frame materials, and you have all these little problems that maybe no one problem is that big of an issue. But if you have a little problem in the foundation, a little problem in the frame, a little problem in the siding, sooner or later, all those little problems add up. And then the house comes crashing down. And I think we're kind of at the point now where we're seeing that come crashing down. Like that article said, they're talking about the lack of a playmaker, talk about new head coach. And, I think you just kind of brought that all together. I think in some ways, Stevens and his knowledge of the roster, like they were talking about the article there, his understanding of the roster, knowledge of the roster, the players on that. I think some of that, sort of staved off the collapse to some level, because he was able to maximize his players just enough to keep the team above water. And then you bring in Udoka, who doesn't know the roster, doesn't know the players, and I mean it's looked pretty bad. But I don't think that's all Udoka's fault. I think he was dealt a roster that was really probably, doing a little bit better because of Stevens' experience with the roster. And then with Udoka coming in, I don't think he really knows how to use it, because you see he's kind of trying to do what Brad's done over the last couple of years with the double big lineups. It really isn't working. And so I think that's, I think that article is correct that, getting Udoka in there and replacing Brad Stevens, who at least knew the players, I think that's, kind of caused everything to come to a head. I don't think Udoka is the only problem or even the primary problem here. I think the real problem is that over the years, since 18-19, really, we've just kind of ignored a lot of these big issues that have been coming up on the team, or not big issues, but small and mid-sized issues, and we've let them get worse and worse and worse. And now with the new head coach who can't do enough to counterbalance those issues, we're seeing, the whole team just kind of, I wouldn't say implode is probably too strong a word. We're seeing the season that we're seeing now. And I think that really that should be kind of a wake-up call for a lot of the fans who said that, we didn't know what we were talking about, or, who said that everything was fine, and that all we needed to have happen was for Kemba Walker to get healthy or whatever. I think this should be kind of a wake-up call that, like this team is in a very, I would say we're really in sort of like a crucial point, a tipping point this year and this upcoming offseason, where what we do will determine whether or not Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are going to have a chance to win a title in Boston, or if it's going to be a failed experiment and we're going to end up having to blow it up and get nothing for two all-star level players. I think we're kind of at that tipping point now, and that this trade deadline less so, but I think this upcoming offseason and maybe next season, maybe we have next season as well. But we're really at that, at the point now where things are hanging in the balance, and we have, the ownership and the front office, they have to act, or we're going to lose Tatum and Brown, and we're really not going to get similar value in return. And I think that's something that fans really need to realize, is that everything isn't okay in the franchise. We're not just one player away, from being a contender. We're not, Jason Tatum finding his groove. That's not going to fix what's going on with this team. And I think unless fans, ownership, and the front office really realize that, I think I think it's going to be a very, very disappointing chapter in the history of Celtics basketball.
Kevin?
I agree with the article. It's on point. Again, we're all of us are sitting here trying to figure out what they need. I mean, if you really think about this, like last year, we knew we needed a shooter. That's why they went out and got Fournier. We knew we needed some guy that could knock down the shots. We knew that. But right now, we're at a point where we don't know what they need to get them over the hump right now. Okay? So whereas, as fans are concerned, we try to tell them when Kyrie left. We try to tell them when Al Horford left. We try to tell them when Gordon Hayward left that these guys alone can't do it by themselves. They're not that good of a duo. Okay? And now they're starting to see it for themselves, and now they're like, wow, really? Even with Kemba, it just wasn't going to work for us. So I get the whole article is on point, because again, we're sitting here talking about Bradley Beal, who's a ball dominant point guard, and then we're talking about James Harden, who's not a ball dominant point guard, but he would definitely move the needle for the Celtics to win a title, to be a title contention. So he gets the point. Udoka, I don't know. Me personally, I'm gonna say this: I didn't want him as a coach. I wanted Chauncey Billups. That's what I wanted. Okay, and I think with you bring Chauncey Billups in there, you bring a guy that's been in Boston, understands what it is to play in Boston, and he may feel some type of way that he got traded, so he wants to prove to them that he belongs. But your coaching staff has to be of the mindset. Stoudemire, I don't have a problem with Stoudemire, Well, what has he done? What has Stoudemire done in the pros? You know what I'm saying? So I think if you're going to get a young coach, you have to bring in somebody like you should have brought in like Larry Brown.
Experienced backup coach, right? Assistant coach.
Exactly. You bring him in there and you allow him to basically run your defense or something like that. You know, and then you can concentrate. You can concentrate basically on the offense side of the ball and let him do the defense side of the ball, or vice versa, whatever the case may be. So I don't blame it on him. I don't like. Again, I wanted Chauncey. I don't feel like he was. I just feel y'all know how I feel about the whole situation with the black thing, and I don't feel like he was the person for that team. From the history that the Boston Celtics have from the day they were established to right now, as much as they did for Afro Americans in sports, I don't agree with if it ever comes out that Udoka got the job because he's black. I will be really pissed off about that because you're sacrificing these guys' careers to make somebody happy. I think that if the Boston's going forward, and from the looks of it, they're not really going to be contenders unless something drastically happens in the next 3 weeks. I agree. Everything he said on there, everything he agrees. I'm not saying that it's all Udoka's fault, but again, I think because the way it all went down when Danny left and they promoted Brad Stevenson, I think all this was like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. They didn't really think about it, but this is what they did. Again, I say this like you say, Igor. I'm going out to Sam Presti. I'm like, yo, what's the figure? What's the money figure that I need to get you to come to Boston? All right, what's the money figure that you need to get here to right this ship? Because that guy drafts well. And look what Oklahoma has. They have over 30-something draft picks in the next 2 or 3 years. So they're going to rebuild through the draft like they did with Kevin Durant, Serge Ibaka, Westbrook, and James Harden. So that to me, I think that's the key is getting somebody in there. And again, like Sam Perkins said, everybody is too comfortable in this organization right now. So something might has to be shaken up in order for everybody to realize, yo, man, I don't even know, my job's in jeopardy now. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know if I'm gonna be here, how long I'm gonna be here, if I could be here tomorrow. You know, I'm like I would hate to be Frank Vogel right now. He's in competition of winning and losing every day, and that depends on him keeping his job or not, which I think is foolish. I think it's really foolish. But could you imagine if Boston goes to Udoka and tell him that guy would probably quit. He would probably quit. I'm telling you, he would, because I don't know if he can motivate them in that aspect to get them to understand. But you guys, y'all know, always said that Jason and Jalen need to be at the bottom of the barrel before they realize how important it is to be a Boston Celtic, the tradition it is to be a Boston Celtic, and you don't want to be on the Celtics for 7 to 10 years and never go to NBA Finals and never win a title. You don't want that label. You know what I'm saying? So that's my thoughts, Igor.
Thanks, Kevin. I wanted to ask Daniel about that, but he's gone. And I hope that he will return. By the way, I have a couple of notes from today. Interesting that two Celtics bloggers, guys, and viewers Interesting that two Celtics bloggers and writers actually agreed with me and what I said the Celtics should do: sell and tank. The first one in Ryan Bernardoni. He's famous Celtics cap expert, and he's good in projection of the future. Actually, from all the Celtics writers, I think that he's the best in projecting the future. He said, quote, it doesn't matter that fully healthy and actualized version of the Celtics roster could be fourth seed. We will never see a prolonged period of health. They are nowhere close to fully actualized, and the hole is too deep to dig out of it anyway. Sell everybody except Jace, even for peanuts, and tank. In addition, the fourth, fifth seed isn't anything to write home about to begin with. The second one is Alex Kongu, ex from Celtics blog. He said, quote, the Celtics fully actualized were already maxing out as a second round exit team with chance to lock into Eastern Conference Finals via injuries. They are not fully actualizing, and we are at year and half of 500 team hell. It is time to sell and to hit the reset board around the foundational pieces. Do you want some comments, Andy?
Yeah, just like I said, I don't think they need to tank. I think the real thing is they need to give the young players some time. They need to stop trying to win at the expense of minutes of the young players. I think that's really kind of where I'm at on that. I'm not even convinced that bringing in Bradley Beal would fix this team at this point. I think there's a lot of issues that go well beyond the talent and the roster. But I also, I think the real thing is that we need to give the young players minutes. I think that the record will kind of fix itself. I think it'll kind of go down naturally when we give more minutes to Peyton Pritchard and Romeo Langford, Grant Williams. I think that'll kind of naturally cause our record to go down. I don't think that we need to sell everybody on the team. I think that we do have some promising young pieces there. I think people like Grant Williams. I think he could be a pretty good 3-D wing. Given his improvements in 3-point shooting, I think he has a definite role there. I think that Peyton Pritchard has a role as like a scoring plug off the bench. And Pritchard is one of those people where I think his value to the Celtics is going to be significantly higher than his value to anybody else. And so I think that that's one of those players that you keep because you're never going to get anything significant in return. I don't see a lot of people offering a whole lot for Peyton Pritchard at this point in time. So I think that Boston holds players like that. Now, guys like Romeo Langford, I would definitely make available in trade because I think that you might actually get something for Langford because he's athletic, he's a 3-D wing. If he can stay healthy through this season and showcase some 3-point ability, I think he might actually have some value to a lot of teams. Not big time value, but good enough value to get maybe a protected pick from a good team, not from a bad team, but or use as trade filler or something like that. So yeah, I mean, like I agree generally speaking. I just think there's some exceptions there because I think there are some players like Grant Williams, Peyton Pritchard, are the two that really jump out to me, where I just don't think we get any sort of equal value back in return.
Kevin?
Um, I agree with Andrew. There's nothing really more for me to say about it because I would say the same thing he was saying. I think Naismith is. I'm gonna say this about Pritchard. I wouldn't mind seeing Pritchard start, because he would pass first, and the only time he's really gonna actually shoot is if he's like almost wide open or he got a layup or something like that. He's not gonna force the issue. Um, Naismith, I think, lacks confidence because he's not playing a lot. And I think, like he said about Romeo, I think Romeo, like watching the game last night, he came off the bench and they sparked. They went on that run right before halftime, and Scal was like, "Yo, they're gonna put him in because he's gonna be a spark off the bench." Um, and that's what they've been. That's definitely what they've been missing. He's a pretty decent shooter. I don't know what his percentage is, from the three, but I mean he doesn't go out his way to do anything spectacular. So I think he could be a nice little pawn as far as trading. But it just seemed like every time we trade a player and it comes back to haunt us, they burn us every time. You know what I'm saying? So that's why you got to be careful about who you let go and what you get back.
Okay, we have Daniel back with us, hopefully. We will finish soon. Andy has to go soon. Daniel, do you have something to add? I just read that the Celtics writers and bloggers, Alex Kungu, ex-Celtics blog, and Ryan Bernardoni, ex-chief editor of the Sports Hub, site, they said that the Celtics should sell and tank, similar to what I wrote. And the Celtics fans were not pleased with what I wrote. What do you say?
Well, again, I think people got to remember sell and tank can mean two different things in this situation. You know, if you're talking about a tank situation where we're talking about a complete rebuild and trying to go, almost 10 years without basically being able to go back and competing for a championship anytime soon, similar to like the rebuild you saw in Golden State, which has resulted in what they got right now in this situation, or what we've seen, let's say, in Chicago and has them right now kind of looking like a decent team this year. Well, then, yeah, I'd be pissed off as well in this situation with having to wait 10 or 15 years in this case. Hell, we got a taste of that, not that long ago before Garnett and them showed up in this situation. You all remember that in this case, we had that 16-game losing streak in this situation, prior to the, obviously that season when we lost Red Auerbach and all of that, but literally, ladies and gentlemen, this team, even if we were to start selling everybody in this situation, this team is not going to be stupid enough to sell Jason Tatum and get rid of him. They're not going to be stupid enough to get rid of Jaylen Brown in this case. Those two are safe. No matter what happens, they're safe in this situation. And from what the rumors have said, Time Lord is safe as well at this point. The only ones who really are on the trading block in this situation is everybody else. And with Tatum and Brown and Time Lord, no matter who else you put on this team, you're not going to be bad enough to basically get the worst record in the NBA. So really, you are not in a full-blown tank mode in this situation like we were a couple years ago in this case, which resulted in you getting
those high picks that resulted in Tatum and Brown coming over here in this case. What we're saying is literally, ladies and gentlemen, screw the rest of this season because you're not going to be able to win no championship this year. It's already kind of been written in stone, literally. Do we got to send a brain surgeon to the rest of your homes in this situation and have them basically drill it into your head in this case to actually get you to realize it? Because somehow being under 500 more than midway through the season, you still don't seem to understand it at this point. If that's the truth, we can have Kevin Dixon pay for the surgeries in this situation. I'm sure, he'd be willing to do it in this case, but literally we're saying screw the rest of the season and come next year, play the season out. If you can make the playoffs, fine at that point, but don't basically make next season about winning a championship. Make next season more about trying to get guys, as you guys mentioned earlier. Make next season more about just trying to get the guys like Pritchard, Neesmith, Langford, and any of the young guys you have. Give them the chance to actually play. Let them play, let them develop, and see what they would have basically for the future. If Langford with regular minutes can actually show he's got what it takes to actually be something, then you can keep him going forward. But if he basically plays regular minutes and basically looks like a piece of crap, then basically he's not the man to keep. But then the key thing is keeping your eye again on 2023. Keeping your eye on the prize, ladies and gentlemen, because again, 3 years have passed. You basically handed the keys to Tatum and Brown, and you've had plenty of years to see that a two-man unit of Tatum and Brown leading this roster is not enough at this point. The next step is to make it a three-man unit. And why? Because every other freaking team in this Eastern Conference basically has a three-man unit. Brooklyn has, obviously, Kyrie, Durant, and Harden in this case. Is Tatum and Brown good enough to outscore those three? I don't think so. They haven't done it yet. We've gotten practically our ass kicked every time we faced them. Heck, it's been only sometimes they only have two of them and we still get destroyed. What about the Milwaukee Bucks in this case? You got Giannis, you got Middleton in this situation, and in most cases, it's only a question of who's going to be the third star that night in this case, and sometimes you beat them, sometimes you don't. And then you got the 76ers, obviously, in this case, that Tobias Harris and Embiid in this case are the two, and Ben Simmons would have been the third, but obviously now he's acting up and wants out. So literally, you need that third star. There's no ifs and buts about it in this case. So that's the type of rebuild we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Not the rebuild that's going to make you take 10 to 15 years to basically develop your guys and basically then try to get you to finally get back to being a championship contender. We're talking about a rebuild where you send everybody out, get rid of the guys who have failed you for the last several years at this point, and focus on using the money, using the assets to basically get a superstar when the time is right and the superstar you want finally hits the market. But until that time happens, you let the young guys you have in this case start to get themselves into the right groove, start to develop their skills in this case. So like that, when you finally get that third superstar, you can decide which of those young guys do you want to keep with you and which ones do you want to say, grab your things and get out of town in this situation because we do not have enough minutes basically to keep you.
Great. I have nothing to add. We will see what the Celtics management will do at the trade deadline. Again, what is hurting Andy is gone, and we will go soon. What is hurting me, like I said, that the Celtics are missing every single opportunity to make the small improvements. Um, I mean, you cannot make a big trade right now, right? So, I mean, make a small deal. Remember how we got Isaiah Thomas? I mean, Isaiah Thomas was, I cannot remember the players. It was something like the pick and some player that was not important. And he was brought back to Boston as the guy who can help the Boston in scoring of the bench because at that time, if I recall, the Phoenix Suns were having like the 3 point guards that were not in good agreement, not complementing each others. They were trying to get rid Goran Dragic, Isaiah Thomas, and could not remember the third one. Never mind. The third one stayed in Phoenix, and the other one traded to Miami, and Isaiah Thomas traded to Boston. Because of the mess in Phoenix, and Isaiah was watched as the sixth or seventh man of the bench, the small improvement guy. That was pre 2019 Boston. We actually were trying to get better, doing the small moves. And it turned out that Isaiah Thomas is big move, but he's meant to be the bench guy. And he ended with one of the most impressive seasons in the Celtics history as a single player, 2016-17, one of the fan favorite with good reason. He played after his sister's death for the Celtics. He played injured. He ruined career here. And, we are all thankful that he lifted the franchise as much as he could, and, this is the perfect example how you should always try to make your team better in the small capacity. You are not only waiting, you should not only sit and wait for the big trade to come, you should work to get better every single day. I mean, for example, if some player becomes available, the role player that is better than Richardson, Dennis Schroeder, Marcus Smart, you're not thinking, oh, but I love Marcus Smart, he's my favorite. No, this player X is better than Marcus Smart. He is better than he's having smaller contract than Marcus Smart. Is this checked? Yes. Trade Marcus Smart for that player X and get better and get smaller money. That's how are you doing business. Another player becomes available. You're packaging one of your young players that you're not playing anyway, and one of your second round picks that you're not going to draft anyway, and you're getting that kind of player. And your team is getting better. Now you're developing those players that you get, they're playing better, and they're becoming what? An assets. And then you accumulate the picks, one pick by tanking this year that we are mentioning from 7 to 11 place, and those players that you accumulated and developed as assets, and you are packaging all those picks and assets, and you're making blockbuster trade for the third star that is becoming available. But what I'm afraid and what I don't dislike to see from Brad Stevens is that he took the page from Danny Ainge's book. And I'm talking about Danny Ainge from 2019 to 2020 first. And that is not trader Danny Ainge, but this is Danny Ainge get under the text line. So we are selling out the players like crazy just to get under the tax line. And this way, you're hurting your potential in the future business and trades. And when you do such a lousy job managing your franchise, you cannot expect the good results to come because if you are working bad on every single level, you will get bad every single year, and that is what is happening here. We are just regressing. Okay, Daniel, final words.
Well, been trying to get access to a page. Obviously, when you guys were talking, you was reading your article, my computer ended up freezing, but they named another player the Celtics are apparently trying to grab in this situation from the Phoenix Suns in this case. And they also mentioned 4 more teams who apparently want to go after Dennis Schroeder at this point. So just trying to get the page to open up again in this situation on my computer. So it's on BleacherReport.com, and it appears they're mentioning a bunch of other rumors at this point. Again, we're only about 3 weeks away from the NBA trade deadline in this case. But I looked at the guy's information, and apparently he also has just a 2-year deal, this year and next year. So if the Celtics are trying to basically set themselves up for for all that cap space, he would basically still fit, the plan in this case. And he only makes about 3.5 million or so. So if the Celtics were to obviously give him up, basically get him for Schroeder, let's say, then they would obviously be going the route of reducing the money in this situation. So that would obviously be one of those things that they would obviously be enjoying in this situation. But literally, again, the Celtics are part of that. I believe they said that the Dallas Mavericks would be one of those teams that would basically be interested in Dennis Schroeder. I believe they said Minnesota is another at this point. So again, so it's definitely one thing, you guys, if all right, so finally the page opened up. So let me see if I can just find that actual spot where the Celtics were listed. In this case, as they got about 18 different things here listed, mentioning different teams and all that. So the Celtics one is, all right, Celtics dishing Schroeder. There's a strong possibility Dennis Schroeder is traded ahead of the deadline. Boston is expected to avoid the tax and therefore likely won't be able to afford the point guard this offseason, which was also why the Celtics moved Daniel Tice to the Bulls last season. New York, Cleveland, and Dallas have been mentioned as potential destinations for Schroeder, and of course Utah. The Phoenix Suns big man Jalen Smith has been a recent trade target of Boston, according to league sources. There is a widespread belief that the Celtics will be very active in efforts to bolster their roster around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in the coming weeks. So obviously, both those rumors right there reported in that one thing in this situation. So the Knicks, the Cavaliers, the Mavericks, and the Jazz at this point all seem to be interested in taking Schroeder from us in this case. And again, the Phoenix Suns with Jalen Smith, the Celtics basically can go at it. Then you guys talked about a point guard in this case, that we need a point guard. It appears the Brooklyn Nets are said to be exploring trade options to get rid of Javon Carter. Javon Carter has a 2-year deal that pays him just over $3.5 million roughly for this year and next year. So that could be another option in this case. If the Celtics wanted to go that route. Again, people have been saying to go the route of giving Pritchard the starting spot, you would just need a reserve point guard, and that guy basically is kind of used to it in this case. The Mavericks are now talking about deals. They're saying teams are circling Dorian Finney-Smith as a strong candidate in Dallas. Both Finney Smith and Jalen Brunson will enter unrestricted free agency this summer, and the financial squeeze on the Mavericks will likely be too significant to retain both. Carlisle was known as Finney Smith's biggest advocate in Dallas, sources said, and Indiana has been mentioned as a potential destination for him. League personnel are also monitoring the possibility Dallas waives Willie Cauley-Stein to create a roster spot for Marquise Chris, who is on his third 10-day deal. And of course, Cauley-Stein, remember, the traded player exceptions can be used to get guys in this situation in free agency in this case. So it just doesn't have to be basically done just in trades. So if you guys think Cauley-Stein could be basically someone of use in this situation, that could also be considered. They also said the Hornets are facing a similar roster crunch this summer, and appears PJ Washington is a trade possibility for the Hornets. The Hornets, whose books are quickly approaching the tax, have some cap maneuvering ahead of them, with Miles Bridges and Cody Martin's expiring contracts likely to be sent out at this point. They also said that the Timberwolves are in talks for the possibility of getting Ben Simmons at this point, as they're looking basically for a trade partner for Carl to basically join forces with Karl Anthony Towns, despite his success pairing with Jarrett Vanderbilt. It's believed Minnesota is willing to part with Malik Beasley in this case. So that's another name in this case. And then Orlando. We just spoke about Orlando in this situation earlier in this show, you guys. Orlando is said to be asking for first round picks in return for each of Terrence Ross, Gary Harris, and Mo Bamba. Rival teams are optimistic, though, that those prices may drop to 2 second-rounders, as the Magic ultimately accepted for Evan Fournier last deadline. So basically, if you don't do any sort of dealing with them in this case and they get closer to the deadline, they may basically just accept second-rounders. So, again, some information for you guys as we get ready to hang up here in this case. As, again, we're just about 3 weeks or so away from the deadline here. But quite a bit of names in this situation that are now being sent out there to the light, and maybe the Celtics again may want to consider. It could be that we don't go with Bogdanovich, but you could maybe use Smart to go for somebody else. But the key is to get rid of his contract.
Okay, Kevin, final words.
Okay. With everything you said there, that it kind of makes me believe that Brad Stevens thought that this team was going to be good, because he probably wouldn't have gave Marcus Smart that big contract, because now we're trying to get rid of that contract. So there's a lot of moving parts out there that Boston can be a part of moving forward. I like Willie Cauley-Stein for simple fact that if they cut him, I mean, it's always been Boston's interested in this player. It's never been this player's interested in Boston. I don't know if he would be interested in coming to Boston, but you want a player like that on your team, because for the simple fact that he got cut. Now he got to prove himself again in the league, prove that he belongs. So he gonna play with a different type of different type of attitude, because he don't know if his stay in the NBA is gonna be long or short. So that's why I'm kind of interested in Cauley-Stein. Also, I heard that Millsap is supposed to be leaving the Brooklyn Nets as well. They're letting him go. That's another person that we were interested in on during the off season.
Yeah, he requested
But
his 1 minute.
And so, so that's another person that we could look at, because again, we were looking at him during the offseason, and he chose to go to the Brooklyn Nets. I still think he got a lot in this tank as well. He could definitely help the Boston Celtics out. My concern, and it hasn't changed, is I still think that they're silently tanking. They're not gonna come right out and say it. But if they make no moves on this trade deadline, y'all know they're tanking to get somebody. That's all I got to say. But let's try to enjoy the rest of the season out. If you didn't vote for the All-Star game, please do. I don't vote, personally speaking. because I don't think fans deserve the right. I don't think the fans should be the one to vote for players to get in, because now you have Kyrie Irving in front of a whole bunch of guys that have been playing all season long, and he's going to make the All-Star team because people want to see him play. I personally think that the NBA need to change that part of the All-Star voting. I think the players should vote for the starting five and let the fans vote for the bench. You still get the fans still get a chance to vote, but the players the players and the coaches know who deserves to be on the All-Star team. They know who works hard enough to be on the All-Star team. There's no way Kyrie Irving should be on the All-Star team and only played 6 games, 7 games, maybe. Come on, that's asinine. But that's my thoughts for the night, man. And I would love to see Gino before my birthday, which is February 10th, which is the trade deadline. So we'll figure. Hopefully, it'll be a good day for me.
Okay, that's all. Thank you all. The next 3 weeks, if I'm correct, we will have the shows, and around 19th, the next video chat we are enjoying in video chats when we can assemble the gang together. Hopefully that you're having fun watching it. Thanks, Jared Carson, for questions. Thanks everybody that were commenting at the page. It was really, live at our page. And I'm happy 147 people reached the video during the show. So tomorrow Danny will upload it on the YouTube, our YouTube channel. Again, we are Celtics Talk Radio. You can reach us blogtalkradio.com. We Bleed Green Celtics Fans Forum, our page, and Celtics Talk Radio page. We love you all. Andy, Kevin, Igor, and Daniel will be with you the next Saturday on the show. We will have the guest if something doesn't go wrong at the last time. If you are watching the Celtics and enjoying, I envy you, because I don't know what are you doing. Personally, I'm taking medications and do not watch them live. I'm watching them on replay to avoid the stress. But it is what it is. Have a good night all, and talk to you soon. See you the next week. Check our shows at blogtalkradio.com.